Welcome to Revenge with Arya. I co-signed my brother's apartment lease because he said he just needed 6 months to build his credit. 8 months later, I got a call from the property management company telling me I owed $14,200 in back rent. That's when my brother laughed and said, "I figured you'd cover it. You always do." I paused, took a breath, and said, "Pull up the subletting clause in your lease, page 4. Read it slowly." His laugh stopped. "My name is Ren Calloway. I'm 31. I work in freelance brand design from a one-bedroom apartment in Columbus, Ohio. I don't own a car I can't afford. I don't take vacations I haven't saved for. I build everything I have, one invoice at a time, and I did it alone, without asking anyone for a single thing, which made it very easy for my family to assume I would always say yes. It started 2 years ago. My brother, 26, charming in the way people are when they've never faced a consequence, told me he found the perfect apartment. Ground floor unit in a decent neighborhood. Washer and dryer in unit. Close to the job he swore he was about to land. The problem, he said, was his credit score. Not bad enough to be denied outright. Just bad enough that the landlord wanted a cosigner. Someone with a clean record, a steady income, a name that looked good on paper. He asked me at my mother's kitchen table in front of her, which I understood even then was a calculated choice. "It's just your name," he said. "You won't have to pay anything. I've got it covered." My mother nodded along like he was asking me to help carry groceries. I asked him about his income. He waved it off. Said he had a job lined up. Said it was basically confirmed. Said I was overthinking it. I should have stood up right then and left. Instead, I signed. The lease was for 12 months. I co-signed in April. By June, he had the job. By August, I stopped hearing from him unless I texted first. By October, I figured he was just being his usual distant self and didn't push it. Then February came. I was in the middle of a deadline when my phone rang. Unknown number. Property management company. The woman on the other end was polite in the way people are when they've made this call many times before and stopped feeling bad about it. She told me the account associated with Unit 2B was 4 months behind. She told me the total owed, including late fees, was $14,240. She told me that as cosigner, I was equally liable. She told me a formal notice had already been mailed to the address on file, my address. I sat very still for a moment, asked her to repeat the number. She did. I thanked her, hung up, and called my brother. He answered on the second ring, which told me he didn't know what was coming. "Hey," he said. "What's up? When did you stop paying rent?" Silence. Then, "Who told you that?" "The property management company." 4 months, almost $15,000. "What is going on?" That's when he laughed. Not nervous laughter, not apologetic laughter. The kind that comes from someone who has already decided you'll handle it. "I figured you'd cover it," he said. "You always do." "It's fine. I'll pay you back." I didn't yell. That surprised me looking back. I just asked him one question. "Are you still living in that apartment?" Another pause. Not exactly. Not exactly. I found out the rest in pieces over the next 48 hours, because he wouldn't tell me directly. I had to pull it out of him the way you pull a splinter. Slowly, carefully, with a lot of pressure. He had moved in with someone he was seeing around September. Just temporarily, he said. But he hadn't broken the lease. He hadn't told the management company. He hadn't stopped being on the hook for rent. What he had done was sublet the apartment, informally, cash only, to a friend of a friend. No paperwork, no approval from the landlord. Just handed over the keys and stopped showing up. The subtenant stopped paying in October. My brother didn't find out until December. By then he owed 2 months. By February, 4. And rather than tell me, rather than do anything at all, he just waited. Assumed I would find out eventually. Assumed I would handle it. Assumed that my name on that lease was the same as a blank check with his face on it. I went back and read the lease that night. Page 4, Section 9B, subletting without written landlord approval was a direct breach of contract. It voided certain protections for the leaseholder, and it created grounds for the cosigner to pursue legal recovery of any costs incurred as a result of that breach. I read it 3 times. Then I called my attorney. I didn't have a corporate lawyer on retainer the way some people do, but I had worked with a contracts attorney named Sandra Park on a client project 18 months earlier, and I'd kept her card. She specialized in civil disputes, and when I explained a situation, she didn't flinch. She said, "Do you have the original lease?" I did. Did you co-sign knowing he intended to sublet? I did not. Then you have a case. He breached the lease terms you co-signed under. That breach exposed you to financial liability without your knowledge or consent. You can pursue civil recovery for every dollar you're forced to pay. I asked what that looked like practically. She walked me through it. First, I'd need to document everything. The original lease, the subletting clause, any communication with my brother about the apartment, and any communication with the management company. Then we'd send a formal legal notice to my brother. Not a text, not a phone call, a document, putting him on notice that I intended to hold him liable for all costs associated with the breach. And then, she said, I needed to deal with the landlord situation directly because regardless of what my brother did, my name was on that lease and the debt was real. I called the management company back the next morning and asked to speak with someone in the legal department. I explained that I'd been co-signer in good faith, that I had just discovered an unauthorized subletting situation that I had no knowledge of, and that I was consulting legal counsel. I was professional. I was calm. I asked for a formal accounting of all charges and a 30-day window to resolve. They agreed. That afternoon, I sent my brother a text. I need you to call me today. This is not optional. He replied 2 hours later. Can it wait? Kind of in the middle of something. You breached the subletting clause. I've spoken to an attorney. Call me or the next communication you get from me will be a legal notice. He called in 11 minutes. His voice had changed. The easy confidence was gone. He sounded younger, almost confused, like someone who had wandered into a room they didn't recognize. You're getting a lawyer involved? Over this? Over $14,000 and my credit score, yes. I said I'd pay you back. When? With what? You haven't paid rent in 4 months. Things got complicated. I had heard that before. Things always got complicated for him. Things got complicated when he needed bail money 3 years ago and my mother called me at midnight. Things got complicated when he borrowed my car for a weekend and brought it back with a cracked bumper and a vague story about a parking lot. Things got complicated in ways that somehow always ended with me holding the bill. I'm not covering this, I said. I want that in writing from you, that you acknowledge the debt and intend to repay it. If I don't have that by Friday, Sandra files the notice. He went quiet. Ben, does Mom know you're doing this? There it was, that question. That exact question. The family lever pulled out right on schedule like a fire alarm in a building that was already burning. This isn't about Mom, I said. She's going to be upset. Then you should have paid your rent. I hung up. My mother called that evening. I knew she would. He had called her first, of course, framed it his way. Softened the edges, cast himself as the one being backed into a corner. Her voice when she called me was the voice she used when she had already decided who was wrong and just needed me to agree. He's your brother, she said. I know. He made a mistake. He sublet an apartment without telling me, stopped paying rent, and waited 4 months to let me find out through a collections call. That's not a mistake, Mom. That's a choice. You don't have to involve lawyers. You can just work it out. I tried that. He laughed at me. Silence. He said you were overreacting. I looked at the ceiling. At the small water stain in the corner, I had been meaning to report to my landlord for 2 months. At the ordinary, unremarkable evidence of a life I had built by never letting anyone else hold the controls. If I don't pursue this, I said slowly, the debt follows my credit, my ability to rent, to take a loan, to run my business. All of it gets flagged. I am not sacrificing my financial future because he doesn't want to be uncomfortable. He's going through a hard time. So am I. The difference is I didn't create this one for someone else. She didn't respond to that. Just said she hoped I would think about it. Said family was more important than money. Said she was tired and going to bed. I sat with the phone in my hand after she hung up and thought about all the times I had heard some version of that speech. Family is more important than money, delivered right before I was expected to spend money on the family. I opened my email and started compiling the documentation Sandra had asked for. It took 2 evenings. Every text thread, every email from the management company, the original lease with my signature and his, the subletting clause highlighted, a written timeline of events with dates. I even included the voicemail from the management company, which I had saved automatically through my phone's backup. I sent it all to Sandra on Thursday night. She confirmed receipt Friday morning and said the formal notice would go out by end of business. My brother got it Monday. He didn't call. He texted, which felt appropriate. The message was long and messy, full of capital letters and sentence fragments, the written equivalent of someone pacing a room. He said I was betraying him. He said I was doing this to make myself feel superior. He said he always knew I thought I was better than everyone else just because I had my life together. He said a lot of things that I read once and did not respond to. I screenshotted the message and sent it to Sandra with a note, adding to file. She wrote back, "Good instinct." The management company accepted a payment arrangement, negotiated partly through Sandra's intervention. I covered the first 2 months to stop the late fee accumulation and protect my credit, with a formal written acknowledgement from them that the remaining amount was being disputed and would not be reported while under legal review. That hurt. Writing that check hurt in the specific way that injustice hurts, not because the money was gone, but because it left through the wrong door. But I kept going. 2 weeks after the notice was sent, my brother called. Not to yell this time, not to deflect. He called at 10 on a Tuesday morning, and his voice was flat in a way I hadn't heard before, like the air had gone out of him. "What do you actually want?" he said. "I want you to repay every dollar I had to put out because of your decision. I want a written repayment agreement, witnessed and notarized, and I want you to acknowledge to the management company that the subletting was done without my knowledge. And if I do all that, you drop the legal stuff?" "That was never the point," I said. "I didn't do this to punish you. I did it because you left me no other option." He was quiet for a long time. "She thinks you hate him," he said. He meant my mother. "I don't hate him. I just stopped protecting him from himself." Another long pause. "Ben, I didn't think you'd actually do it." "I know." That was the whole problem in one sentence. He didn't think I'd actually do it. My mother didn't think I'd actually do it. They had built a version of me in their heads. Reliable, responsible, quietly furious but ultimately accommodating, and lived inside that version for years. The real version, the one that had a contracts attorney and a documentation folder and a perfectly calm voice during uncomfortable phone calls, had never fully registered. Until now, we reached an agreement. Not because he suddenly developed integrity, but because Sandra made clear that the alternative was a civil filing that would follow him through every rental application, every credit check, every financial decision he made for the next 7 years. He signed the repayment agreement, notarized. He confirmed in writing to the management company that the subletting was his decision alone. He began making monthly payments, modest but real. My mother did not speak to me for 3 weeks. I felt that. I want to be honest about that part. I felt it more than I expected to. Not because I doubted my decision, but because losing a relationship, even a fractured one, even one where you are consistently the person who gets left holding the consequences, still costs something. But I also felt something else. Something quieter and more durable. On the day the management company confirmed my credit record had been fully cleared, I didn't celebrate. I just sat at my desk and looked at the screen for a minute. Then I opened a new client proposal I had been putting off and started writing. A few weeks later, I was walking through a neighborhood I liked on a Saturday afternoon when I passed a small framing shop. In the window, there was a print, simple, black text on cream paper, nothing fancy. It said, "The cost of your piece is not negotiable." I went inside and bought it, hung it above my desk when I got home, stood back and looked at it for a while. I thought about the moment at the kitchen table when I signed that lease, about how my mother had nodded, about how my brother had said, "It's just your name," as though my name were a convenience for him to borrow, as though the thing I had spent 31 years building, my record, my reputation, my reliability, were a tool available to anyone who sat across from me and asked nicely. I thought about all the times before that. The bail, the bumper, the birthday dinners where I quietly paid for everyone and no one asked. The phone calls that only came when something had gone wrong and I was the person expected to make it right. I had spent so long being the responsible one that I had let that become a job with no salary and no benefits and no option to quit. I quit, not loudly, Not with a speech, or a confrontation, or a list of grievances read aloud in a parking lot, just quietly. The way you close a tab you've had open for too long and realize you hadn't needed it in months. My brother makes his payments. We don't talk otherwise. My mother and I speak occasionally, briefly, about nothing that matters. It is not the relationship I would have chosen, but it is an honest one, and that counts for more than I used to think. I still freelance for my one-bedroom apartment in Columbus. I still build everything one invoice at a time. But now my name on a document means exactly what I say it means, no more, and I choose very carefully what I agree to put it on. I used to think being the responsible one meant being available to absorb everyone else's consequences. Now I understand. Responsibility means owning your own choices and letting other people own theirs, even when it's hard, even when it's family, especially then. I've thought a lot about why I said yes at that kitchen table, and I don't think it was naivety. I knew, somewhere underneath the nodding and the signing, that things might not go the way my brother promised. I knew his track record. I knew what basically confirmed meant when he said it. I said yes anyway, and I've had to sit with that. What I understand now is that saying yes wasn't really about trust. It was about avoiding the discomfort of saying no in front of my mother. It was easier to sign than to watch her disappointment settle across the table. So I signed, and I handed someone else the wheel of something I had spent years building carefully, and then I acted surprised when it veered off the road. That's the part nobody talks about when they tell stories like this. The part where you were a willing participant in your own undoing, not because you were foolish, but because you were tired of being the difficult one. Tired of being the one who asks too many questions and wants things in writing, and doesn't just trust family. What happened with my brother was not random. He did what he had always done because I had always allowed it. Every time I quietly paid something back, every time I absorbed a consequence that was his, I was teaching him something. That my name, my credit, my stability were resources he could draw from without asking. He learned that lesson from me. I handed him the syllabus. That's not self-blame. That's just cause and effect operating in real time. The choices we make about what we tolerate become the rules of every relationship we're in, and when those rules go unspoken, other people write them for you. What changed wasn't that I suddenly became someone harder or colder. I didn't stop caring about him. I called Sandra because I cared about myself, maybe for the first time in a long time in a way that I was willing to actually defend. That's the part that required something from me, not anger, not indignation, but a quiet and steady decision that I was worth protecting even when the person I was protecting myself from was family. The intelligence it took wasn't legal strategy. Sandra handled that. The intelligence it took was being honest with myself about what was actually happening and refusing to dress it up as something more comfortable. My brother didn't make a mistake. He made a series of choices, and then he made one more, to laugh when I called. That laugh told me everything I needed to know about whether anything would change without consequences. Ren bought that print because she needed the reminder on the wall. I need it too, honestly. The cost of your peace is not negotiable. That sentence doesn't mean, be ruthless. It means know your worth and stop discounting it for people who would never do the same for you. That's what I learned. Not a lesson about family or money or leases. A lesson about the quiet, unglamorous act of choosing yourself before you run out of yourself to give.